In this video, we are going to talk about Abigail Disney mounting a shareholder revolt against Chapek's salary. We're also going to dive into a little bit about Disney animation, the current state of the animation house and sequels and what have you. We have a lot to talk about with a very, very special guest up next. Hey everybody, welcome aboard to another episode of OG 55. Today we're going to talk about Abigail Disney mounting a shareholder revolt against Mr. Bob Chapek. We're also going to dive into a little bit about Disney animation. But before we do that, I want to introduce a very, very special guest, friend of the channel, first time on the channel, Mr. Matthew MUIR. Matthew, welcome aboard, brother.
Thank you, OG.
It's a pleasure having you on, Matthew. If you can kind of introduce yourself and let everybody home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
I've been a fan of Disney pretty much since I was born, although my interest has really peaked up quite recently, actually. You can find me on Twitter at Matthew85190042. Quite a long number there.
Perfect. Well, Matthew, it is an absolute pleasure having you on, brother, and we're looking forward to talking some Disney with you, man. So it's gonna be a good time. And Mr. Freshly Squeezed, very familiar face here on OG 55. How are you today, sir?
Doing pretty good. You know, this is quite the interesting topic, and I mean, the ability to actually talk about it's really, really fun. But to do it with Matthew here, who's followed the channel for a long time, I mean, I'm super excited to get into this topic for sure. And I do believe, Matthew, you're from either the UK or kind of the European region.
Yeah, I'm definitely from the UK.
Okay, cool. That is super cool. So I think an interesting perspective as well. To find me, well, you can go ahead and do so right down there at Vash Sky, just like it's spelled right there. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice and news and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
Pay attention, it's Joe time.
There you go.
Yes, it is. Perfect. All right, let's dive into our very, very first topic. Okay, Absolutely. This is interesting. Abigail Disney reportedly wants to challenge CEO Bob Chapek's pay. Abigail Disney, the Mouse House heiress turned vocal critic, is reportedly attempting to organize a shareholder challenge of embattled Disney boss Bob Chapek's $32.5 million payday. It says here, Disney, who has pegged her personal net worth at $120 million, has been quietly courting institutional investors to challenge Chapek's compensation at the company's next shareholder meeting, the Wrap reported, citing multiple sources familiar with the matter. Now, Matthew, I'm going to start with you, buddy. What do you think about this whole report that Abigail Disney is she's trying to mount a shareholder revolt against Chapek's pay? What are your thoughts on this, man?
I honestly think it's quite outrageous because I genuinely don't think Abigail Disney stands for what the Walt Disney Company should stand for. She does not share the values of any previous CEOs, apart from possibly Bob Iger. She only shares the views of Bob Iger as CEO. She does not share Michael Eisner or Frank Wells' values, and she especially doesn't share that of Walt Disney or Roy E. Disney or Roy O. Disney.
No, 100%, Matthew, 100%. And this is the thing with Abigail Disney, her last name. And that's where her clout begins and ends, is her last name. She is 100% an activist first and everything else second, right? And honestly, I mean, I don't really think that she has Disney's best interest at heart. I really don't. And look, I think like she's an activist, and that's fine. She can do whatever she wants, and that's 100% okay. but she doesn't care about the Walt Disney Company. Roy Disney did. When Roy Disney mounted that Save Disney campaign, he legitimately cared about the well-being of the company. He wanted the company to get more creative, to do better on the content side and on the theme park side. Abigail doesn't care about any of that. She cares about her political activism. And that's what's first and foremost, right? So that's why I kind of don't take a lot of what she says very seriously. But Dre, what are your thoughts? Where are you kind of at right now with Abigail?
Yeah, I have been highly critical of her in the past, and the reason is because, I echo a lot of Matthew's sentiments, of course, but moreover, I mean, she's been handed everything, and I believe she. If I had to guess, I believe she feels like she lives in the shadows of, the ones before her, and I think she's partly motivated by what she does. By it's a little bit like, how am I going to make a name for myself, kind of thing,
right.
And I don't think she's genuinely interested in the actual activism that she proudly goes on about all the time, but rather. I think she's kind of in it for herself, kind of thing, and so I don't really feel that her public stances and so forth are necessarily genuine. And she almost I don't know, she always comes off to me as if I could best describe this, like she's she doesn't like to be affiliated with Disney,
right?
Like she is almost repulsed by the name and what they ultimately stand for. So I don't know. It just I'm not a huge fan. And when it comes to this issue specifically, when it comes to Bob Chapek's pay, it's an interesting idea. I mean, she's from her vantage point, she's suggesting that, hey, this guy's getting paid $32 or $35 million, somewhere around there. And it's like, why is he being paid this much when the company has kind of underperformed? Obviously, the stock has gone down, 40-50%. I think it's about $94. Is that correct? Or 95?
It's around there. Yeah, 94, 95. Last time I checked.
Right, which is quite a bit lower than, maybe where it was last year, maybe around 200, which I felt, I think I told you at the time, OG, I felt that was a little bit overinflated, but it has certainly gone down since then. And, as we said before on this show, a lot of the market is down. Now, I will say Disney's down a little bit more than others, but, it's certainly something that is affecting the entire marketplace, I would say. In terms of some economic slowdowns and so forth. But, she contends that, well, maybe we should be able to claw back some of his salary based on his performance. And I'll say this about executive compensation, okay? Some of it is based on performance, no question. But a lot of it has to do with the kind of the marketplace and the market rate for somebody like a Chapek, somebody like these kind of big CEOs, and what the market will actually pay for them, right? A lot of the idea of paying executives maybe over the kind of employees and lower down cast members last year, actually not last year, but in 2020, right? They laid off a bunch of them, but then they repaid executives and so forth. Part of that was motivated by keeping executives around and preventing them from taking up jobs somewhere else that might actually pay more. So there's kind of a give and take here, and it's a little why Chapek is getting paid the amount he is. But I don't know. I mean, even in the article, in the Wrap article, it goes on to suggest that Chapek is not necessarily the one being paid the most out of all the studios, right? I believe it goes on to say that David Zaslav is being paid over $200 million for exactly, right? I mean, it's an unbelievably sized compensation package, and I believe they were saying that He's being paid more than all the other studios of the other major. I'm sorry, the CEOs of all the major studios combined, I believe is what it said. And that was an astounding amount. And even in the context of Disney, I believe when Bob Iger was out the door after everything was said with his base compensation package and stock options and all of that, I believe Iger was taking home about $65 million a year when he left. So in the grand scheme of things, I don't think Chapek is necessarily getting paid an amount that is completely off base. I believe it's around like $32 million.
Right.
But you know, Abigail thinks she has a point, and I believe she feels that she has some either investors or shareholders who view her argument similarly.
Yeah, I think she's going to be a little disappointed with the shareholders. I'll get into that in a second. But Matthew, what do you think about in terms of like? Do you think that like Abigail will be successful in kind of
absolutely not.
Absolutely not in terms of courting these shareholders. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't think she can court these shareholders because I think shareholders can probably see the writing on the wall, but she's an activist. Everyone slams, Kathleen Kennedy as being an activist. Disney tries to shove identity politics into Star Wars when this woman, Abigail Disney, who bears the same name as Walt Disney, is the epitome of a... He's the epitome of an activist, the epitome of a woke person, the epitome of an SJW.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. I mean, Abigail is very much. If this was like a decade ago, Abigail Disney would be Occupy Wall Street. I think
yeah. Well, and it's an interesting thing, I mean, look, some people, listen to Matthew. Some people might roll their eyes, but let's be honest here. I don't think Abigail, her activism, I don't think it's, like I said, motivated for the best interest of the company.
Right.
A lot of it seems to be motivated by other things, right? That's what I kind of meant when I said that she's kind of repelled by the Disney name almost, because it's not necessarily in the company's best interest. Now, listen, I understand, some people say, well, cast members aren't getting paid enough. Maybe they should get paid more. Maybe executives should be paid less. Maybe that there should be a rebalance of that equation. But, she... I'll say this. What is her net worth? I believe it's like 120 million is what it's pegged at. And, it like I said, it sounds a little bit ingenuine, right? It's like,
oh my God, I'm Abigail Disney, and I'm just fanning myself on my cash here, and but you should really pay these cast members more. I really think, and it's not cool what you're doing.
Even though she actually doesn't do that much, right? In order to support cast members or get kind of get pay to deliver to these cast members or whatever. And I don't know. It just seems, like I said, a little bit ingenuine considering her position, considering her arguments and her kind of vitriolic statements, and what actually has been done the last, 10 years or 15 years under her watch.
Right. And one of the dangers too, I think, a lot of content creators will get up here and they'll kind of just tell cast members what they want to hear. Yeah. Cast members deserve $35 an hour. Yeah. Because that's what they think that people want to hear.
Right.
But there's a danger to that because these companies always find a way to save money. So if Disney starts paying their cast members a huge amount of money like Abigail Disney wants, right?
Yeah.
All Disney's going to do is they're going to capitulate. They'll pay their cast members more, and then they'll just lay a bunch of cast members off to offset the loss. So now instead of getting paid $15 an hour, you're unemployed. And that's the reality of the situation here. And we've seen it before when it comes to like the fast food industry and what have you. The minute the fight for $15 thing started, McDonald's and other fast food companies started to automate. That's not a coincidence, So there is a danger. Look, the cast members are the heart of the parks, are the heart of the theme parks. I love cast members. And that's why I'm looking out for them, because I'm telling you, if the pay goes up too much, Disney will look in other ways to offset that, including layoffs. I don't want to see anyone losing their job. What do you think, Matthew, in terms of this kind of push by Abigail and other activists to kind of get these cast members pay way up there? Do you kind of agree with me or disagree with me that
I completely agree with you. I think it's completely counterproductive.
Counterproductive? You think it could lead to layoffs and stuff if it goes up there too much?
Yeah, it definitely will. If Disney ends up having to pay its employees more, it'll probably just try to offset the losses some way. No company is really safe from that.
It's an interesting idea because, the automation argument, we're seeing Disney attempting to automate systems now and reduce roles and, hey, can we have a cast member do the work of 3 or 4 or even 5? We're seeing, Bob Chapek talks about yield management strategies and all that kind of stuff. They're doing it now. I would imagine, I would agree with you, OG, if the company was put in a position where they were compelled to pay cast members significantly more than they are now, we would absolutely see a decline in the amount of cast members that we see, working at the parks and resorts, but also other areas of the company, right? And they're short staffed now. I couldn't imagine how those roles, what could occur with those roles reduced, not just for guests at the park, but also their fellow cast members that work alongside them. A lot of these places are working on skeleton crews as it is. It's a fascinating thing. It's not nearly as simple as it might suggest, though. You have to, even within the theme parks business. Disneyland Resort, what you're talking about, like anywhere between 30 to 35,000 cast members. Walt Disney World, probably well over 100. That's a significant cost when you look at the scale of such things, and you look at the annual capital investments that you have to make and so forth, and it's a really interesting balancing act. And I doubt Abigail has thought that far. She's never run a business; she never had to.
Exactly.
That's kind of how that is.
No, that's the thing, and that's why I said earlier on in this discussion that her last name is really the beginning and the end of her clout, because she hasn't run a business. She doesn't know what it means to run a multinational billion-dollar company like Disney. I don't think she really cares, to be honest with you. I don't think she would shed one tear if Disney went out of business yesterday. She wouldn't care at all. This isn't about Disney. At least with Roy Disney, that was a very contentious time for the Walt Disney Company. But Roy Disney, along with Stan Gold, they had the company's best interest at heart. They wanted better content. They wanted better quality stuff, and they were fighting for it. Roy Disney fought for that his entire life, and I don't see that same thing coming from Abigail. And, I really, really don't. I see someone who's an activist using her last name as leverage, and I can't get behind it. And just because she has the last name doesn't mean that she has good ideas, And look, you can get someone in there who has no connection to the Walt Disney Company or the Disney family at all, like a Michael Eisner or a Frank Wells or a Howard Ashman, who do more for the legacy and more for the company than someone who just has the last name. The last name doesn't impress me. I'm sorry, it just doesn't.
No, and she's now wading into waters where she has very little experience, I think, say what you will, but at least her father worked, I believe he was on the board at several moments in various parts of Disney's history. He knew how to navigate corporate waters pretty well. The stuff that he was able to mount, the stuff that he was able to do when it came to Disney was actually quite impressive. And now we have Abigail kind of stepping into this arena and becoming a more vocal shareholder, I guess. And did we ever figure out the extent of her shares within Disney? Word on the street is that she doesn't have that much, but she obviously had to have some kind of, I don't know, she had to have some kind of amount of shares, significant amount of shares, in order to mount this kind of what is it, clawback or offense against maybe specific board members or Chapek himself. I mean, do we know any of that?
I haven't heard how much Disney stock she owns. I imagine it's more than what I own. I own about 75 shares.
Okay.
but Matthew, have you heard anything in regards to that? In terms of how much exactly like Abigail Disney owns in terms of Disney stock?
I haven't heard that much, but I do think that there's very little she can do with her respective shares in the company.
Yeah,
I think any real action against Chapek.
Well, I mean, I think the only thing that would amount to a kind of an offensive strategy would be if she would be, able to get enough institutional support from enough shareholders or investors. I don't quite know if she's going to be able to do that, and that's kind of the second part of the story. Do we think she's going to be successful in this? Do you think that she'll maybe, I don't know, win the ear of some of the other big shareholders or investors? Do we feel confident at all that she's going to be able to do this?
I don't think she will, because I think these investors are these investors that she would be kind of courting are big money people. And she's an activist, and she's not in it. She's, like I said before, she's not in it to make the company money. She's in it for activism, and these big shareholders are gonna scoff at that. Oh well, we don't really. That's not what they're there for. Right. They're there to make the company money, and Abigail isn't there to make the company money. What do you think, Matthew?
I agree. She's only there for her agenda. She is not there to make a single cent worth of money. So shareholders have virtually no interest in her beliefs.
And it's an interesting idea because, I know if Abigail came to me and said, hey, we got to claw back some cash from Chapek, maybe we have to oust him entirely. It's like, is this more about you and, is there other motivations besides just, clawing back shareholder money because of a compensation package that Chapek received? Or is it more about, as we've said before on the show many times, your activism? Is it about your making a name for yourself? Is there an underlying motivation that might be the real motivation for her, for her actions? And I would be highly skeptical of what she had to say as a result. It's an interesting idea, but I just don't think it has, I don't think she'll be successful. Like I said, she's never really navigated these waters before, and now that I think about it logically, I think Peter Rice, as we talked about him before on the show, I think he could have been fired for the reasons that we've said on the show before. But I think the other reason why he might have been fired is if he was at all involved in this whole kind of plot against Chapek. And maybe Abigail was in her ear, and maybe some messages were intercepted, that kind of thing. Do we at all kind of think that might be a possibility?
That's fascinating, Trey. Well, I'm sorry, Matthew?
I say definitely. I honestly think that Bob Iger, Peter Rice, and Abigail Disney share all pretty much the same line of thinking. None of them truly care about the Walt Disney Company. I know, OG, that you respected Bob Iger quite a bit, and even I respected Bob Iger. Heck, even I once believed the narrative that Bob Iger was a total saint. But now I'm starting to see that he isn't the hero everyone thought he was when Chapek took over.
Right. No, you're 100% right, Matthew. I used to respect Iger a lot. I mean, I used to be a big time Bob Iger fan, and since he's left, I've started to really my opinion on him has changed quite a bit. The way he handled the transition was really, really shitty. The way he threw Chapek under the bus, and he did, right before he knew things were going to go down with the pandemic, he is like, you know what? I'm out of here. And all these leaks out of the from the Hollywood trades and the hit pieces. If you don't believe Iger had nothing to, if you don't believe Iger had anything to do with that, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but people at home, I'm telling you that there's something there with this. This guy has undermined Chapek from day one. And that's what really turned me off to him, because it seems like Iger is more about Bob Iger than he is about the Walt Disney Company. And I used to stand up for Iger quite a bit. And I'm starting to see some true colors here. I don't think he cares about Disney at all. If you cared about Disney, you wouldn't have thrown Bob Chapek under the bus. Not because he has to care about Bob Chapek, but Bob Chapek is literally piloting your plane. You want the guy to have all the tools he needs, right? I mean, you're in a plane with the pilot. You want the pilot to have everything he needs to land safely. And Bob Iger said, you know what, Bob Chapek? We don't care. I'm going to throw you under the bus and sink or swim, buddy. That doesn't show me a guy who cares about the Walt Disney Company. That shows to me a guy who is concerned about his legacy and wants to make sure the next guy doesn't outshine him.
And you know what? I honestly think that if Iger did truly care about the Walt Disney Company, not only would he have never thrown Bob Chapek under the bus in the first place, but he would have resigned 8 years earlier. He wouldn't have listened to the board. That was 100%. The only reason he stayed as long as he did, just to enhance his own image.
I mean, look, I had heard before about how Iger had wanted to leave on the high. He wanted to leave at the top. I remember hearing about his departure plans after the opening. Oh no, sometimes that happens. But I remember hearing about his departure plans when it came to after Shanghai Disneyland opened. It's like, oh, I'm going to leave, after 2016, after this thing opens, and I'm going to leave on top and that kind of thing. And it's like, I mean, it's an interesting idea that you leave at this kind of high point, but why is that why is it a factor kind of thing, if not for image? And OG, I think you've made one of the best points I've ever heard on this, which is, Iger couldn't take the loss when it came to 20th Century Fox, know, and when you told me this, it really kind of stuck, because it's like, oh my gosh, that was definitely the reason why, the company would even pursue a almost double valuation from their original offer for 20th Century Fox. I understand, Comcast had a lot to do with that, but it was like he couldn't. I think you're right. I think he couldn't take the loss. He couldn't imagine himself being on the losing end, especially when he was about to exit. And now, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars that the company's now in debt in. We have rising interest rates now, which has put them in kind of a crunch time type situation, and saddled Chapek with this kind of debt that he now has to mitigate. I mean, it was not the best way to leave the company, but for Iger's image, oh yeah, I mean, that's exactly the state I leave it in, just to make myself look better. And, we'll have the other guy pick up the pieces of my actions. It was totally outrageous, and I think you're right, OG. I think that's motivated by more his image than anything else.
Yeah, he knew he was retiring, and he couldn't go out on a note that the last acquisition attempt was a failure. So he was going to get Fox, whether he had to overpay for it or not. Disney be damned. He didn't care. His legacy was on the line there, and he was going to get it. And that's why it's crazy. $70 billion for Fox. For what? Because you got the Simpsons on Disney Plus and you got the X-Men? It's ridiculous.
Oh, don't worry. We got Avatar 2 coming out. So there's that. Look, it is an interesting point. You're talking $70 billion, an astounding amount of money. Think about where $70 billion could go, okay? And to put that money into perspective, I mean, you're talking Shanghai Disneyland was built for anywhere between $5 to $8 billion. 70 is an astronomical figure that the company is probably going to have to be paying back. And again, with rising interest rates, by the way. So, that's not a place where I want to be. But that's probably going to have to be paid back, over maybe 2 decades?
Right.
I mean, that's what we're talking here. And it's it's an unfathomable amount of cash, and it was all, I think, like you said, OG, like you told me, I think it was all because of his image. He just couldn't let it go. He just had to snag that last whale before he left, and it's interesting. A lot of people cite, oh yeah, Iger was a success for Pixar, the Pixar acquisition, success for the Lucasfilm acquisition and Marvel and stuff like that. But nobody ever really talks about 20th Century Fox, because even they know that it wasn't worth this unbelievable amount. That actually begs the question, was it did Rupert Murdoch and his association with him have anything to do with it, and any improprieties there? And it's just like you said, for The Simpsons, for Avatar, it wasn't at all worth any of that amount. I was uncomfortable with the purchase before, when it was originally valued at it's like around $30 billion ish figure. I was like, that's an astounding amount of money. And even when you look at company assets and what the company is worth, that's an unbelievable figure. And then they paid more than that. I mean, almost twice as much. He put the company in a very, very dim position, and that was before the events of 2020. Remember, he signed off. As OG brings up early in this show here, he signs off right before the whole world implodes, and knew what would happen as well, because he had seen it with Shanghai Disneyland. His deluxe resort, and the deals that he made with China to get that thing going. I mean, that's probably a whole book on itself, and one of the reasons why I'm not so high on Iger, even before his latest moves concerning Fox and everything else. But he knew this was coming, and yet he was like, yep, there you go, Chapek. Here's billions of dollars of debt, and by the way, all your all the ways of that the company makes money, with the theater business, studio business, and all that, that's all going to be shut down. So good luck. It was totally outrageous.
No, it is, and that's why I'm not really that hard on Bob Chapek. I know it's like the popular, it's fashionable amongst the Disney community to bald man bad, But the dude got Disney through the pandemic and the lockdowns pretty much unscathed. I mean, they didn't have to sell off parts of the company. They didn't have to sell off the entire company. It wasn't broken up into pieces. The dude came out of this looking pretty decent. I know the stock price, but it's not the end of the world right now because everyone's stock price is lower. It wasn't that bad. He handled it pretty well, actually. Surprisingly, I mean, he really did. But Matthew, what do you think Bob Chapek should do, Matthew, going forward now? Because obviously the Bob Iger thing is a factor, and he's kind of from the sidelines, kind of throwing darts at the company, right?
He needs to pick off potential activists like he did with Peter Rice, and like he's hopefully doing with Abigail Disney, because deep down, I don't think Chapek wants Disney to be a woke company. He wants the company to just be politically neutral.
Right.
And I think Alia brought it up that Disney had no need to stand up against the Don't Say Gay debacle in Florida, because all the other big streaming companies like Netflix and what have you, they themselves have promised inclusivity, but without going far left.
Right. No, exactly. 100%, Matthew. And this is the problem, too, with a company like Disney going political. The country is so divided politically, right? Like, it's very difficult for a political candidate to get over 50% of the vote, because it's pretty much the whole country is like split right down the freaking middle, right? So with that landscape right now, why would a company like Disney get political? Because you're going to lose 50% of your audience almost by default. No matter what side you choose, whether you're woke, conservative, doesn't matter. You're going to lose 50% because the politics, you see it politically. These candidates can't break 50 because the country is like seriously down the middle. It makes no sense. So Matthew, you're 100% right. Chapek should go in a more neutral direction politically because it's just good for business. It just is.
Yeah.
Why alienate 50% of your audience? It doesn't make any sense.
And to be fair, I think that's what he's already trying to do.
Yeah, no, he is absolutely.
No, I completely agree, and I think this was one of the kind of dividing lines between Chapek and Iger. I think Iger definitely wanted to go in a more political correction. I'm sorry, political direction, I should say. Sorry about that. A political direction with the company, take outward stances on things, and I think Chapek was like, "Dude, we're not some activist organization. We're not some, what is it, 501c3 or anything else. We're a business,
Right.
and the business is making money here." And I think he looked at the, he looked at the kind of changing sentiment around the country and some kind of hot button issues and stuff like that, and said we're gonna get roasted if we take stances one way or another. I think Chapek felt that the best interests of the company were kind of a more politically neutral company than a politically active company. And I think that's what kind of caused this initial divide between Chapek and Iger. I think they were really kind of at odds with this. And when Chapek says, "Hey, follow the data," I think that's kind of what he's talking about here. It's like, hey, I think there's better business to be had in catering to the largest swath of audience that we possibly can, rather than kind of being a more progressive company, as I think Iger envisioned, especially at the end there. Matt, I think it's a very kind of interesting thing where, what Chapek should do going forward right here, and I do agree. I mean, you can hear it too. You can hear the. Oh yeah, he coming. He going. He's going through the hallways, man. He going through the hallways, and I think he's going to be snapping necks here real fast. Because
Chapek, I think that might actually be Iger.
Oh, Iger. Well, interesting idea. It's an interesting idea as well. I think Chapek is kind of in a sink or swims type moment right here.
Yeah.
Right, where he's obviously he has few friends, he has few allies, and the Disney company, I think, is going through some turmoil right here, and he's really got to right the ship. And look, I think there was maybe a mutiny that was had, right, especially during the April and May months. And I think he really has to, grab the reins back on this thing. And I think Peter Rice was a huge part in that, making him an example for the entire company and the entire Hollywood industry. That you're not going to get one over on Shapes here. So it's a fascinating thing that's happened here. But Matthew, I do agree with you. I think there are people within the company, and I think Bob Iger was one of them, where, especially at the end, Abigail Disney and even people who actively work for the company right now, that are more interested in some other things than the company's long-term success.
Right.
I think that's a fair point. And I think if Chapek has to do anything, it's root out the people who are more interested in some other things rather than the company's shorter long-term success.
100%.
But in terms of what's happening to Bob Chapek, I'm just going to send a picture through from an article published back in February. When the shareholder meeting was coming up, there's this picture I found by this company called Disney Dining, which says, "As they can't fire me." I just sent you the link, and as you can see, there's Chapek with a smug expression on his face, and there's a speech bubble saying, "I'm not going anywhere." You might want to get it up to show it to everyone.
Oh, Dre, you're on mute, buddy.
Sorry about that. I do apologize. Amateur hour. Let me go ahead and share this with y'all.
Yeah.
I think this is a very interesting thing here. That right there. It's an interesting thing, huh? Go
And
ahead.
it's true. It's true. I don't think he's going anywhere. I know a lot of fans are not going to be happy to hear that, but he's, like I said before, he steered the company through the pandemic very successfully. A lot of fans don't like his personality, and that's fine. But on the business end, he's making moves, and he's been pretty successful. And I think that's where it counts when it comes to the shareholders. So, I mean, that's pretty much where it's at. We'll see. And D23 Expo will be a big deal because we're going to start to see Bob Chapek's vision for the parks and the content and all this stuff. Because right now, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing coming out of Disney is still Bob Iger residual stuff.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see the D23 Expo because that's really the next 5 years or so in the future, which is all Bob Chapek. So it'll be very interesting. And it'll be hilarious to me if it's like super ambitious, because fans kind of painted Chapek as like this really like cheap kind of like money guy. Oh, it laughs so hard if he's got like $1 billion expansions for like all these resorts. That look, I don't expect that, but I would laugh so hard if that was the case because life tends to throw curveballs. We've seen it over and over again, and it wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me. This guy, he's pegged as a cheap guy. And then he'll go in. He'll get on that D23 stage, and he'll announce the world, and it'll. We'll see.
They'll have to bring Josh D'Amaro though with him.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
everyone just
Just have
keeps
Josh
giving Josh
D'Amaro.
D'Amaro a pass.
Look, all Chapek has to do is go up on there, and even take the booze, and go announcing for the opening of spring 2023, the People Mover, and that's all he. That's all he would have to do. That's all he would have to do. Is just come out there, say the People Mover's coming back to Disneyland. That's it. The crowd goes wild. No, but seriously,
they would actually go wild.
It would, and I think, as we said before on the show, I think one of the things that might be really important for D23 Expo or for Chapek moving forward is kind of indenture himself to fans, like really kind of do some things that kind of outrage the fans and get Chapek thought in a different light. I think would really help him out and really kind of earn people in his corner, kind of thing, advocating for him to stay and to continue to contribute to the Walt Disney Company, because right now it's big bag Chapek, right? That's kind of the kind of moniker he's earned. A bald man bad, as OG astutely points out.
And he needs to stop using Josh D'Amaro as a shield, because everyone keeps seeing Josh D'Amaro as basically this really nice guy. And you keep saying, OG, that you love Josh D'Amaro because he said hi to you that day in Avengers Campus. That's what everyone will say about Josh D'Amaro.
Yeah, no, Josh D'Amaro, or Daddy Josh, is very much like, because he's charismatic, because he's good looking, he's got the great smile, he says hi to you in Avengers Campus, fans sort of like get this false sense of like, oh, he's with us. Not necessarily, and he definitely, I don't know. I think that sometimes I think the fans are kind of lulled by aesthetics a little too much, and I think they really need to look into this. And here's the thing too. I'm not a Chapek hater. I don't hate Chapek. I think for the most part, I think that he gets a lot of heat, undeservedly so.
But hiring Josh D'Amaro was one of his first moves.
Right, exactly, Matthew. And that's exactly what I was going to say. If you don't like Bob Chapek, and you love Daddy Josh, you should definitely question why D'Amaro was promoted almost immediately when Chapek became the CEO. Doesn't that cross anyone's freaking mind? Like, your guy who you love, D'Amaro, was promoted by Bald Man Bad almost immediately. What does that say about your guy if you hate Chapek? Says a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it is one of those kind of interesting things, right? It's like, hey, you're you're critical for his decision making when it comes to this or that, but I mean, a lot of people feel that Josh D'Amaro is in the position that he should be in now. I have a different opinion of Josh D'Amaro myself. Personally, I don't think he was necessarily the best fit for that position, and I've been highly critical of his actions as of late, especially. But look, listen, some people just can't see any good about Bob Chapek, and they have these kind of blinders on, and it really is frustrating. Some of that's earned, some of that's unfair, and I think even in the Rap article, I think there was a Wall Street analyst who was like, you know what, some of the criticism towards Chapek's unfair. He's had a really, really kind of bad luck. Bad luck, and some of it is I would say bad luck. Some of it is maybe by design by some people, right? There's a lot of people with daggers out, but he has navigated this so far, and you got to hand to the guy that he's been able to do it, and while also keeping the company relatively afloat. It's really going to be fascinating to see what this D23 Expo coming up here in September, what it has in store for the Disney company, because like you said, OG, this is his vision of the company. Right. This is really the first time that he's been able to say, hey, this is what we're doing because of me. So it's going to be fascinating to see.
It's going to be very, very fascinating. So let's pivot now a little bit to Disney animation. Disney animation. And we can dive into Pixar too. I mean, that's kind of all in the same wheelhouse. But Matthew, I'm going to start with you. You're very knowledgeable in regards to animation and what have you. I want to ask you, like, kind of where are you at right now in terms of the current state of Disney animation?
They don't seem to have all that much planned. And I'm not even talking about just original stories, just not that much planned in general.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah. What do you think in terms of because obviously, you're a big Michael Eisner fan, and so am I. I love Michael Eisner, and the Renaissance era was like the crown jewel of Disney animation. And this
specifically Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. Those movies are considered like the absolute apex of Disney animation.
They absolutely were, Matthew. They absolutely were, because these movies, oh God, you're 100% right on this, because they're timeless. You watch a movie like Beauty and the Beast, and it was made it premiered in 1991, and they didn't throw in a bunch of early 90s hip hop jokes because that was trendy at the time. They didn't make any 90s, the slang and all that. It was just a timeless animated feature that you could put next to Snow White even, or Cinderella, and it would fit in that world. But yet it was new and fresh enough to sort of be relevant, right? The new animation that Disney's doing is not that. They think in order to be relevant, I got to add a Twitter joke in Moana and crap like that. And it's that's the kind of stuff that ages your movies. Does anyone talk about Oliver and Company anymore? Do you know why they don't talk about Oliver and Company anymore? Because it's so 80s. You watch that movie, it's like it's a time capsule from the 80s. It's so outdated. Why is Beauty and the Beast, which came out just a few years later, why is that still relevant? Why is The Little Mermaid, which came out in 89, still relevant? Why? Because they didn't infuse these movies with a bunch of modern references of the time. They were timeless films. And that's the thing I think that's missing right now from Disney animation. They think that they have to pander to the current youth, and they don't. It frustrates me.
And I'm not just talking about values, because you were talking in that massive Q&A video about what the sort of political nature of it, how conservative or how liberal it should be, and you said it should stick with whatever the values are at this time. Look, I understand that, but does it just have to shove every pop cultural thing into the films? Because that dates it horribly. I mean, even the Harry Potter movies are kind of guilty of that. because they feel very 90s. They really do feel like a 90s time capsule at times.
Right, right.
It's an interesting idea. I never really considered it. But yeah, I mean, and you know, art is a reflection of the time by the artists who made it. But that doesn't mean it has to live there. You know, it can be something that's that's kind of relevant from the time it was made on, if constructed correctly, and if your prioritization is on the kind of the traditional storytelling aspects, it could live on long after it was made. I think it's interesting. I last night after seeing Top Gun Maverick, I saw a good portion of Coco that happened to be playing, and I was like, man, it's I understand it's Pixar, not Disney Animation, but I was like, I can't really see the company, whether it be Disney Animation or Pixar, making something like this anymore. Something that was so personal, something that was so and look, it is I would say multicultural, right? It definitely is inclusive of some other cultures and regions and so forth, some peoples, but it just man, it was a good story, and that you could play that film 20 years from now, and I think it would still be just as relevant as it when it came out. I can't necessarily say that with the more modern films coming out from these two respective studios. It just seems like they're, like you said, like they're dated.
They are, and you brought up a great point, Ray, when you said that these films are kind of a product of their time, and I agree with you. And I think there's a way to kind of insert that, and a way not to. A perfect example of how to do it the right way was in The Little Mermaid. I'm gonna give you guys a little example here. I'm gonna show you some visual stuff. So this is the Little Mermaid in her wedding gown, right? Now, very, very timeless though, right? This can be of really any era, so to speak, right? But it was inspired very, very much by, I'm going to show you real quick. It was inspired very much by Princess Diana's wedding dress. You can see the similarities here. Now, it's a product of its time. The Little Mermaid was definitely a product of its time, where it took inspiration from things that were relevant at that time, like the Diana wedding, right? But it's not obnoxious to the point where, like, you look at it and go, oh, that's 1980 something. It still is timeless, but it's that subtlety, is the inspiration. And that's what's beautiful about that Renaissance era, is that it does that constantly, where the new animation doesn't know how to do that. The new animation will be like, you know what? Yeah, we'll throw a Twitter joke in Moana. We'll just be like, there's no subtlety at all. It's just so dated from the get-go. Wreck-It Ralph 2, it's all dated. And they took a lot of time in that Michael Eisner era to respect that and to make these films timeless. Yeah, they took inspiration. Yeah, Little Mermaid has like the bangs that were so popular amongst women in the 80s. Yeah, her hairstyle is very 80s. But it doesn't date the movie, though. It doesn't make it feel like this is irrelevant. It's inspired by, it's not like on the nose though, and that's the difference. And I really hope, and I was hoping Jennifer Lee, when she started running Disney Animation, would kind of get back into that. I'm losing hope on that. We'll see, but I don't know. It's been a few years.
It's been a few years, and we've seen the the output from some of these executives. I think confidently, and I would agree with you. It's maybe not up to the the kind of standards that we were kind of hoping for, right? It's an interesting thing, and I'd say probably the one that kind of gets the closest closest to the sun, so to speak, in terms of maybe dated references and kind of a product of its time is probably Aladdin, and specifically with the genie. But Robin Williams, I think, was he was an unbelievable talent, and could make you laugh whether he was referencing something or not.
Yeah.
So effectively that I think it works even in that instance because it was executed at such a high level.
Yes, it was. Yeah, Robin Williams is a huge factor. And I think the character itself and the premise is also a factor. You have a genie who, it's not like too hard to believe this genie would transcend time, past, future, what have you. So to have him kind of pick up trends of the era and things like that, okay, it's believable. He's a freaking genie. Of course, he's gonna be everywhere at once, basically, depending on the wish, right? So it kind of makes sense for his character. But you take a character like Moana, who takes place in her story takes place in like Polynesia, long before Twitter. It makes no sense. There's no justification for it at all.
Yeah.
It just is thrown in there,
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. What do you think, Matthew, in terms of like the genie and stuff and all that? Because that Aladdin was very much, of all the Disney Renaissance movies, that was the one movie that really did kind of pump in the modern references. What are your takes on that?
I think some modern references in general just need to be kept to a minimum, but if they are applied, they need to try and make it feel believable, like they did with Aladdin.
Yeah.
Right.
Something that would feel, maybe, even with those references, something that would feel at home, within the Renaissance or within the extended Disney canon. It's an interesting idea. I mean, look, I agree with you guys immensely that probably modern references should be kept at a minimum, right? And I think a studio like Pixar really did that kind of well. Kind of, they could have maybe a few more modern references than maybe something like Disney Animation, but actually pull it off in a way that that had a kind of a timelessness in itself. But when it comes to Disney Animation specifically, yeah, I would agree with you, especially timepieces, especially things that are supposed to be happening in various instances across the centuries or something like that. That would probably be for the best. Obviously it's hard because you're always a product of the time, but this is why I think. And I've advocated for this before. Get back to the fundamentals of storytelling, and the whole thing I think works itself out quite nicely.
It does, and that's one of the things that has really frustrated me with Disney Animation, right? And I know I sound like I'm picking on Moana, but it's just kind of like a perfect example. Disney Animation, they flew their artists out to Polynesia and things like that to study the culture. Right, and all that stuff. So they go out there, they fly these artists out there that to study the culture, to get it right, right? And then they go in there and they throw all these jokes in there that just undoes all the work. Like, I don't understand it. Like, and they do this over and over and over again. Like, if you're going to take the time to study the culture, to get the time period right, to really just make things work, can you leave the Twitter joke out of it, right? And I know, again, it sounds like I'm picking on Moana, and I'm trying not to. It really is a perfect example, and that's the kind of stuff that really bugs me. Is like, you go to these countries and you study the culture and all that, then keep it like accurate. You don't need to throw in that joke. I said it before and I'll say it again. Walt Disney never talked down to his audience. It was very risky for him in the 1930s and 40s to do what he did, like with Bambi, like killing Bambi's mom the way he did. How traumatizing that is, knowing children will be in the audience. And he said, you know what, kids can handle it. He didn't talk down to children. He didn't make Minion level movies for children back then. He understood kids could handle it. Fantasia, Chernabog is very scary. He didn't water it down because he knew children would be the audience, you know? And I think Disney nowadays, they really lost sight of that. You know, stop watering down your content. You don't need to add a Twitter joke. You don't need to add an Instagram joke. It's okay to be scary, to have slow moments, to tell a story and be intelligent. Kids can do a lot more than you think they can. If they released a Little Mermaid today, there would 100% be an Instaclam joke. You know, Ariel will be sitting there with her seaside cell phone taking pictures for Instaclam. You know she would be. You know she would be. It's terrible. Absolutely terrible. You know,
and that just plays into what you were talking about a few videos ago about this whole culture war. I'm not just talking about the conservative liberal side of the culture war. I'm talking about just culture in general.
Right. No, 100%. 100%.
I think to Matthew's point, it's like I think there's a school of thought that says, hey, you got to include this, you got to play to this demographic, you got to play here, play there, and it's almost like you have like a, I don't know, it's like art by committee or focus group and all that kind of stuff, and I think when you look at what Walt Disney did back in the day, and even some of the Renaissance artists back in the day, I don't think they were concerned as much with that. And you got to get back to that. You got to get back to the art and storytelling. Like I said, I mean, I was watching Coco, and I couldn't stop watching it. Like, it was really, really compelling stuff. It was unbelievably well executed, and it had the feels, and it had the heart, and it had all these kind of things that was like, wow, this is some next level stuff, and it really is sad because it's like, man, I know how good this company can be. I know how good these studios can be in their content creation. It just feels like, either a lack of effort or the lack of people left at some of these studios that are able to produce content on that same level. It's kind of a very sad state of affairs right now, I think, because I haven't really been impressed, and you could say there's multiple reasons for that, but hopefully they get back to that. We'll see.
We'll see. We if we ever needed a Howard Ashman, it's right now. I miss that man so much. He fought tooth and nail for Little Mermaid, Part of Your World. He fought tooth and nail. Katzenberg wanted to scrap it. Oh, it's a slow song, Katzenberg said. Kids won't sit through it. Howard Ashman stuck to his guns. It stayed in the movie, and it became one of the most iconic scenes in cinema history. Disney's got to get back to that. Stop listening to people that Well, and I've even said, like, if you ever watched like the Frozen documentary, the Frozen 2 documentary on Disney Plus, they kind of get into that. Where it's like, oh, well, they did a test screening of the film, and kids started to get squirmy at this moment. We got to insert a joke. It's like, oh, see, that's what kills you. That's what kills you. It's so formulaic. It is down to like almost like a calculus kind of math equation. Just make a good movie with good story, and the kids will sit through it. Don't sit there and over focus group this thing. Okay, it's ridiculous, but we'll see. It's I'm disappointed. I am so much an animation purist. It's ridiculous. I mean, if I was running Disney Animation, it'd be a whole different situation. I would make every movie would be a Beauty and the Beast kind of film. I think that's really the direction that studio should go in. But unfortunately, the people that are running it, they don't think that. They want to go in the Illumination direction, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think you're exactly right. It's kind of lowest common denominator kind of thing, and maybe not trust that kids have a sensibility about these things, and I think they do. I think these movies really, really can resonate with kids, across the kind of age spectrum and stuff like that. And it's sad that they, it's like, oh well, it didn't focus group quite nicely here, so we got to insert a joke and all that. I mean, look, I don't know if you've heard the sentiment before, but I'm a big fan of like rock music and stuff like that, and exactly right. But
There's a
I
book
remember.
coming.
Yeah, I remember even working at Guitar Center back. This was over 10 years ago. About people saying, "Man, nobody rocks anymore." Nobody kind of makes music the way they did anymore. You think of the Led Zeppelins and the Journeys and some of these other kind of big time outfits, and it's like, yeah, it's an interesting point. And when you look how music's created today, especially for radio play, it's put through an algorithm. It's put through this kind of this kind of machine almost in order to guarantee your radio play and to guarantee that there's hooks and stuff like that, and it's all kind of processed and synthesized and all and all that, and it's just like, man, it's we're so far removed. And to come back to Disney on that point. Part of this is expense, right? These movies are so expensive to make. Nobody wants to see a box office dud, so you kind of get kind of cautious, right? You kind of overanalyze, overthink it, and at the end, you've kind of come to this thing that's so devoid of the kind of artistic basis that inspired the film that it's a completely different thing. And I think all these things kind of contribute to the problem that we're seeing now. You really do need like a Howard Ashman or a visionary just to kind of cut through the noise and say, let's go in this direction. And I don't know if that exists right now at either studio.
No.
And I'm going to be honest with you now. I think, when you said earlier about the fact that Fantasia could never be made now with villains like, what's he called again, the villain in Fantasia?
The Chernobog?
Chernobog. You could never make that now, or you could never have a graphic death of Bambi in movies now. But that's the exact same train of thought as someone wanted to cut the dress-ripping scene out of Cinderella and asking themselves, can kids below this age really handle this with this level of graphicness? How graphic can this really be? How frightening can this really be?
Right.
And that's kind of the epitome of kind of classic Disney animation, right? I mean, Walt Disney put you to the range of emotions because I think he understood you got to have high points, low points, scary points, and those points right there make the happy points or the magical moments that much more magical or that much more kind of satisfying to the audience because they've been on this kind of emotional journey. Some people forget that, and it's surprising in what ways they do.
Yeah, no, 100%. And Michael Eisner and Frank Wells and Howard Ashman understood that. That Lion King Mufasa scene with Scar, the death scene, was on
but that
par.
does not apply to Ashman. They threw Ashman under the bus. No, they didn't throw him under the bus. Sorry, he died. He passed away before Lion King could be realized.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah. We lost him way too soon. I really do miss Howard Ashman. I wish he would have stayed with us much longer because I think he had so much in him. I think animation would have benefited greatly from him staying around.
Yeah. I think you're right, OG. The Lion King and what is it? Mufasa's death, right? It's a huge moment, and a lot of people remember that to this day. And we see it played in World of Color, and it still gets the feels from people. It's like, oh man, why would they do that? But you got to have that low point to get you back to the high point, and makes it kind of lovely in that way. But yeah, the low point, I guess, is Howard Ashman passing away in terms of Disney's own history. What an inspirational, influential figure, and it was tragic because I think Howard Ashman, I think he really wanted to. I think he really wanted to do Aladdin before he died, and he kind of understood that he didn't have a lot of time left, and he was kind of forced in the position to actually do Beauty and the Beast. I think against what he wanted to do with his remaining time left, but man, oh man, did he leave an incredible picture for the world. And again, it was the Walt Disney Company's first animated feature to be considered for an Oscar and for Best Picture, right? And just an incredible legacy left behind, and it's really unfortunate that we didn't get to see more from him.
Yeah, no, and for those of you at home watching and you have Disney Plus, check out the Howard documentary on Disney Plus. If you can make it through that documentary without crying, I don't know what to tell you, because that was Howard Ashman has an incredible story, and an incredible man, an incredible legacy, and there would be no Disney as we know it today without that man. So definitely go on D Plus, check out Howard if you haven't already. It's absolutely phenomenal. Matthew, have you seen that? Have you seen Howard on Disney Plus?
I don't think I have, but even then, I do feel his loss was tragic.
Yeah.
Although, having said that, you can't help but wonder if the music style of certain movies might have been different, if they might have just stuck with the same orchestral style for certain movies, like The Lion King and Tarzan and Brother Bear, had Howard Ashman lived longer.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, it's an interesting idea. I think we would be looking at, maybe how those were scored much differently, had Howard Ashman kept on. I mean, even look at something like Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I think is Alan Menken's best work ever, and I think even he would say that. But I mean, would that film necessarily have been scored the same way? It's an interesting point, Matthew. I never really had considered it before, but it's phoenixes will rise, from the ashes, and Disney has proved that before, and I think they will again. It's just, I just wonder who that phoenix might be and what form they might take.
Yep. Yeah. Fascinating. Matthew, I want to thank you, sir. Number one, I want to thank you, Matthew, for all your support. You are always out there. You're the first one out there retweeting our videos. You're the first one out there watching, liking, sharing. We love you, Matthew. I really do appreciate all the support, man. And I want to thank you for taking time today and coming on the channel. We will definitely do this again. If you're down to come on again, Matthew, we'd love to have you, man.
I'll let you know when the opportunity comes up.
Absolutely,
Matthew. I mean, seriously, I echo OG's sentiment. I mean, you've been a real supporter of the channel, real big contributor in your own way. I really do have to thank you for all that you've done for us, and it was great to have you on the show. Really great to have you on the show. We definitely gotta get into this more often, for sure.
100%. 100%. Matthew, if you can kind of remind everybody at home where they can find you on social media.
Sorry, let me just get my account back up. You can find me on Twitter at Matthew859190042. I know that's a dreadfully long number.
No problem. And again, Matthew, thank you so much, brother, for coming on. We will definitely do this again. Mr. Vash Guy, Producer Dre, or as people call him, Dr. Dre.
I know. They call me Dr. Dre, which is
Where did you get the Dr. phrase from?
Where's that from?
Yeah, did you get it from Doctor Who? Or?
Well, in the States, we have we have a famous rapper called Dr. Dre, and that's kind of where that's kind of where.
I thought you were talking about the BBC sci-fi series Doctor Who. I thought you got it from.
No. There's some cultural translation that has to be had, but there's a famous American rapper called Dr. Dre that I guess I'm being attributed to. I'm humbly honored. Thank you. And I doctors got to operate. So if you want to find me, you can go ahead and do so right there at Vashka, just like at the bottom of your screen right there for all the robust discussion, as Christine Wasteland McCarthy would say. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be in the channel you're watching right now at Orange Go 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
Perfect. Thank you, Dre, for coming on. Thank you, Matthew. It was an absolute honor and privilege to have you on today, sir. And everybody watching today, thank you so much for watching, taking the time to check out the content. Comment down below. What do you think about the current state of Disney animation? What do you think about Howard Ashman's legacy? What do you think about this Abigail Disney shareholder thing? What do you think about Bob Chapek, Bob Iger? We talked about a ton of stuff today. A lot of fun. Comment down below. Thank you all so much for your support. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day.
In Sector 2. Malfunction in Sector 2. All droids will be shut down for reloading of labor programs. Stand by for power disconnect.